Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer, the first episode of 2025, and also my first episode of the current Trump administration. Trump 2 is what I call it. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Thomas Howes, from what is known as the Reagan Caucus. It's great to have you, Thomas. How are you doing?
Oh, doing. No, I'm not doing too well right now, actually.
I think a
I'll
lot
explain
of
that in
us,
a second.
I think a lot of us are in the same boat, um, unfortunately, because today, just for reference, is February 28th, and you're the founder of the Reagan Caucus, right?
That's right.
Can you tell me a little about your caucus before we get into what just happened today? Because I think you did
Yeah,
really
yeah,
well.
sure. I'm a traditional Reaganite conservative. Although I certainly have a centrist aspect of myself, where which I think compared to I think if Reagan were today, would too. It just didn't stand out as much at the time because America was less polarized back then. But he would tease his opponents and stuff, but it was in good faith, and people got along with each other still, even if they disagreed. um, but um, but now I just I'm not happy with the where they were in the Republican Party with the populism, the Pat Buchanan populism, and the MAGA populism, and um, and with this last primaries, I thought that Trump was going to be done because he had already lost the election in 2020. And so I was a supporter of Nikki Haley. And after Nikki Haley dropped out, I said, we got to keep this momentum going. She did better than people thought in the primaries, right? Getting 30-40% in some states. And, did a bunch of research, just think what to do. At first I was on that like sort of the type of conservative who says we need to reform the primary system because it produces radicals and stuff like that. But I did more research on that and found out that empirically that's not necessarily the case. A primary system can actually be have a moderating effect. It just depends on the primary electorate, given it just depends on the specific circumstances. So I was like, okay, and also realizing that to change the primaries, you got to change voting laws in like 40 states to really have it make a major impact. And I was like, yeah, this is probably not gonna do it. So as realization that I'm not a Democrat, you know, and I want things to get better. So I wrote a thing suggesting somebody start like a caucus within the Republican Party to build up the numbers we need to overcome some of this, so that we can take back control of the Republican Party for the more Reaganite faction, or even just traditional Republican faction, conservative Republican faction, not populist faction. Um, and uh, and since nobody else wanted to do it, I just did it. So I started a pack. We got right away. People were interested. People contacted me. I got one of the people who works for me is named Mike. He's a successful pollster for A-rated polling firm. Antonio is a successful entrepreneur in Manhattan. He helps us with the tech stuff, and also just he's into politics as well. So and we've been doing that, and we have some local chapters. The biggest one is the one in Utah, run by Justin Stapley. He's got his own pack in Utah. They've been very active. We're trying to extend the chapters as well. We haven't raised that much money yet. We're hoping to find a whale to give us a big funding so that we can set up a more permanent operation, and dedicate more time to it, because we're all people working full-time jobs. But since we started last March, a few days, we're going to have a 1 year anniversary. We've had some progress. We have a pledge that we have that we will pledge to do um, to vote in GOP primaries for traditional conservative Republicans. And we'll use that information to send them information on the primaries when they come up. We've got a bunch of pledges. I don't know the exact number right now because I haven't checked it recently, and Antonio has that data. But our social media presence has grown. We have 13,000 followers on Twitter now. We have other social media accounts, but they haven't grown it quite as fast. But um, and so that's Reagan Caucus. It's growing very fast. We expect it to grow even faster as the next set of primaries approaches in 2026. We plan on having some strategic operations during those primaries, look for some really close races where we think a more traditional Reaganite conservative has a chance to win against a more populist candidate. So we're gonna do that. This summer, we're going to set up a 501(c)(4). Reagan Caucus will become a 501(c)(4), and then the PAC will be change its name. And with the 501(c)(4), we'd like to do some things that are more educational in nature to try to educate people in, an older view of conservatism based on like a sort of Reaganite conservatism. Yeah, that's where we're at. So as you knowing me as a Reaganite, a strong supporter of Ukraine, in Zelensky, I'm a little shook today because of this just shameful, shameful encounter at the White House where uh, Donald Trump and JD Vance blindsided President Zelensky. It was just I'm still very shook by it.
I totally hear what you're saying because when I turned 18, I really tuned into politics because I figured you're of voting age. And I was always a political junkie to some extent, but I thought now you really pay attention since you have a voice. And
Hmm.
when I turned 18, which was 10 years ago, Reagan
Hmm.
was the face of the GOP.
That's right.
And gradually, over this past decade, I've seen that face morph into President Trump's face. First it was the orangey hair. Now it's the spray tan. I mean, how did this happen? Because Reagan was beloved by all factions of the Republican Party. I mean,
Yeah.
I have plenty of Republican friends. When I first registered, a lot of people don't realize this, but I for a short time was a registered Republican. I never voted for Donald Trump, but
Hmm.
Reagan was just the man. And
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
like no one that I know of in the Republican Party gives him a second thought, except for the people who lived through the Reagan administration who remember the successes, the various successes of his presidency. So what
Yeah.
happened?
Well, that's a good question. We kind of got blindsided by it. I mean, some of the people that are voting in primaries today were people that always voted in primaries, but some of them were people that didn't vote at all. Some of them are people that were more interested. Sorry, this might come across as something, but maybe more interested in pro wrestling than they were politics. And that's why they brought some of that pro wrestling stuff um, with them when they came to start voting in politics because they like Donald Trump. And because the thing is, Donald Trump's an entertainer, you know. And I think what happened was even when Reagan was ascendant or when he was the king, not the king, he wasn't a king, but you know what I'm saying, when he was the top, um, there were some people who liked Reagan because of the vibes of Reagan, because he was funny, he was entertaining, he was manly, he was good at teasing the other side or whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever. Some of us actually believed in his principles, in his philosophy. So the ones of us that believed in his principles and philosophy are the ones that have been most shook by this what's happened in the last few years. But some of the ones that like the vibes, they were very quick to shift over when Trump came along, you know. Trump, for all his flaws, he's always been bailed out by the fact that he's very entertaining. He just is very entertaining. It's hard for us to admit it. We don't like him, but he is entertaining. That's why they come to his rallies. He's entertaining. He's funny. Like that time he announced that they killed that terrorist that one time at like you know it, they show that thing on late night because it was so fun. I mean, you know what I mean? But he's entertaining. That actually bailed him out of business too because the fact that he was able to get all the free PR he got because of sometimes would help him out, bail him out when he was having business troubles as well, right? And there's a reason he had a primetime TV show.
Well,
Um,
with you. And
but
actually, speaking of this, a TV show, I have a friend who's on The Apprentice. He's been on the show a few times. His name is Gene. Um,
yeah,
Gene is a wonderful person, and he, like myself, at one time was an avid fan of Donald Trump as a businessman, as an entertainer. And he said, be careful about meeting your idols because Donald Trump, basically what Gene said was that the power of editing was so magnificent that you had this image of Donald Trump. A lot of people did, and I don't
Yeah.
of this charming guy who did good things for others and who cared and gave a damn. That's just not who he is.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing about Trump that makes, for me, where I can at least understand why people find him likable, is there's a sort of like sincerity to his dishonesty. Like there's an authenticness to his dishonesty. So even when he lies to you, it doesn't bother you because you know that's just him being like a schmuck. That's just how he is.
He's a scoundrel.
But Vance is less likable because there's no authenticity to his lying. You just see through that like clear, premeditated manipulation that's going on in his head as he's willing to sacrifice all of his principles to state what he does. So that's why I am a little hopeful that I don't think JD Vance will be as easy a sell for the populist movement as Trump is. He's not as entertaining. He comes across as a jerk. Um, and I think there's the greater sense of hypocrisy with than with Trump, where we tend to just forgive him because he's a clown. I don't understand it myself. I do it sometimes.
You know,
I don't support him, but I don't get that mad at him either.
no,
I'm
I
like,
don't either. And I've said this to people. This is a Blue Dog podcast. Blue
mhm.
Dogs, for anyone who may be tuning in for the first time, it's the conservative centrist Democratic caucus in Congress. We just celebrated our 30th birthday, so woo woo. But aside from that, I have told people online, especially liberals and progressives, every time the president says something offensive and horrific, you act like it's a brand new thing. And at this point, it's just getting tedious and people are starting to laugh at you, including myself. I'm not going
Yeah,
to like, it's like, why are you surprised that this? I mean, I know you're shook up, but you can't say you're surprised, are you?
no, I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised. Um, Honestly, the
He told,
JD Vance still triggers me more than Trump does, because
yeah.
I I know all these people that think, oh, he's this nice guy, he's so smart, he's so whatever, and it's like, guys, you don't care that he lies all the time.
Yeah.
You know how manipulative he is, whatever. So I am a little bit. If I have any derangement syndrome, it's Vance derangement syndrome, because the guy just really rubs me the wrong way. Because I also know a lot of friends of his friends, and I know he's much more radical than even he comes across as. Um, his main influences are Curtis Yarvin and the post liberals, and he just doesn't really believe in constitutional democracy at all. He thinks there should be an elected monarch basically who does whatever he wants, and I just think he's very dangerous, and I don't like him at all. But
You think he's more dangerous than President Trump?
I think so, at least on ideology. He's less dangerous than Trump because he's less charming than Trump, and he's less of a cult figure. And so Trump will get his cult to, sorry, I don't want to be mean, but you know what I mean by when I say his cult. Like they'll get his group to go with it, whatever he wants, right? In that way, Trump is more dangerous. Like there's more elasticity in what Trump can get away with his followers. But Vance is more dangerous because Vance actually has a dangerous ideology. um, People don't realize that. They think he's just like making everything up to go along with Trump, and he is, right? But that doesn't mean that the real Vance is good either. First of all, the real Vance is the person who's lying and doing all this other stuff, right? That reveals his character. But as far as thinking and ideology is concerned, the real Vance is actually even worse than the fake one. And that's what's scary to me. It's like that he actually would throw our constitution, burn it up and throw it, out and, you know, completely replace it with an absolutist monarchy, right? Um, and For that reason, I really don't like Vance. And actually, most of our focus at the Reagan Caucus, because we realized we're stuck with Trump for 4 years, is to find somebody who can compete with Vance in the primaries in 2028.
Are you surprised that President Trump said he didn't see Vice President Vance as his successor?
I was surprised, but I was happy about it.
Well, what
I
do you
was
think? What do you think the president has up his sleeve if he's kind of throwing Vance under the
I
bus?
don't I don't know. I think part of it is jealousy. He doesn't want people to think of Vance as good as him, like to even compare the two. But I also think he wants to leave it open for his children, maybe, that his some of his children can be his successors. or possibly somebody else who finds closer to him, or is even even closer to him in his inner circle.
But what
Or he maybe thinks that he has to work for it. He maybe wants to make him work for it.
from what I've seen, the smartest of all the Trump children that I know of is Ivanka.
That's right, and she doesn't want to be in politics.
Yeah, she doesn't. I mean,
She would be the one who would be best. She's like Cincinnatus of that family, right?
right, right. Like Ivanka is conniving from what I've been told. However, Don Jr. does not have his father's charisma and charm.
No, no, he doesn't.
And
The
Eric
best thing that
is
could happen for the Reagan caucus would be Don insisting on running, Don Sr. endorsing his son, Mega splitting up between Vance and Don Jr. in the primaries, and then a third normie candidate comes in and can compete. You know what I mean?
yeah. So I want
That,
to ask you, who would be your ideal candidate for 2028 with the Reagan Caucus?
well, yeah, I got to be careful with that, because here's basically here's the inside scoop. We talked about this in the meetings. We've got our acceptables and our unacceptables. And our acceptables are those who are at least closer to the Reagan caucus than what I call the Pat Buchanan caucus. So on the margin of within our acceptables is somebody like Ron DeSantis, right? Or Glenn Youngkin, or Doug Burgum, or Nikki Haley, or Brian Kemp, or some person who's charismatic that we haven't even considered yet, right? Um, those are in our acceptable, right? Basically, but then our unacceptables are people like JD Vance and Vivek and um, Don Jr. and go down that line, right? The sort of Pat Buchanan type Republicans. Um, as whoever has the best chance among the acceptables of beating the unacceptables is going to probably be who we endorse.
Interesting.
So we're not gonna divide it up yet. We've got Nikki Haley supporters with us. We got Ron DeSantis supporters. We got Brian Kemp supporters. We got other people. They're all included. Don't think that we're trying to push one or the other. We'll accept any of those, but we want to get. Well, our job is to get all y'all who see the problem to come with us into the primary, and then once it becomes clear that we have a clear favorite, then we're going to endorse that person.
Well, I'm wishing you a lot of luck because this is incredibly important since I think Donald Trump, the leader of his party, is not a Republican. He's Trump. He's transactional. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. I just want to ask real quickly because, we don't have that much time. President Reagan, you know, won 49 states for re-election against
Hmm.
his Democratic opponent, which was huge.
That's right.
And he was the icon of the GOP. It was the largest landslide in U.S. history, as far as I'm concerned, and I believe that is the case. I want to talk a little bit about his legacy because moments after President Reagan was sworn in, within the first minute, I think, of his inaugural speech, he talked about how the peaceful transfer of power was nothing short of a miracle in other parts of the world, or
Yeah,
to that
that's
degree.
right. We
Not,
actually put peaceful transfer of power in our values.
yeah,
Kind
yeah,
of like it's there's a little bit of a special poking at the other side about that.
right. So I want to know, do you think Ronald Reagan would have voted for Donald Trump at any time in 2016, 2020, or 2024, since you seem to be a student of the Reagan I mean, I don't know when you were born, but you seem to be very well educated on the Reagan era and his belief system.
I frankly I don't know. And here's the thing: at the Reagan Caucus, we have a different philosophy than they do over at like Principles First. We are a little bit more tolerant of the fact that people have a tough decision to make when it comes to Republican versus Democrat, even if one of them is Donald Trump, right? So I'll just tell you, I did not vote for Donald Trump this last election, and I keep to myself who I voted for. But other people within the Reagan caucus pinched their nose and did vote for Donald Trump. Officially, from the Reagan caucus, we do not judge who anyone voted for in the past. We welcome everybody who wants to join us to make a better Republican Party in the future, right?
Mhm.
And that includes candidates, right? Like Nikki Haley endorsed Donald Trump. For some never Trump Republicans, that invalidates her forever, right? We don't do that, right? And one of the things, it's part of it's because we understand it's we we're never going to get perfect. We just want to get better, right? We also understand that if we went after like Nikki Haley over that, that would alienate all the Nikki Haley supporters. And then how are we ever supposed to get out of this rut with like doing that? So that's our philosophy on it. But I will tell you that I personally, me, not speaking for the Reagan Caucus, did not vote for Donald Trump, um, and not in 2024, anyways, and not in
Well,
2016.
I
Um,
I have to be honest. I agree with you because I've always said there's a difference between being a Trump voter and a Trump supporter. Nikki Haley voted for Trump, I'm sure,
yeah,
endorsed
yeah.
Trump, but she would not be doing a lot of this terrible stuff that we just saw today in the Oval Office. Like Nikki Haley
No,
would.
she never would have done that. She would be right now. Her biggest thing would probably be doing what we can do to help Ukraine. What can we do to help them win this? Because she knows that actually we owe Ukraine a lot. Like people don't realize that.
Mhm.
Like they've weakened the Russian military. It's one of our biggest threats. They've kept them out of other. They've kept them preoccupied on this war, so they aren't. And they've learning that they're getting hit back because trying their uh, territorial expansion, which is part of Putin's ideology. Uh, this will make it harder for Putin to expand to other places later, including places that are protected by NATO. Right? Um, really, no, they're Ukraine. The thing is Trump today was saying that he wasn't grateful enough, and he says because we gave you $350 billion, and that's just a bunch of baloney. Because the thing is like the actual worth of the we what we gave them in arms was cleaning out our shelves of old arms that we gave them to them, right? And then we refilled the shelves, right? So it cost us $50 billion to fill the shelves, but what we actually gave them was worth more like 18 billion. And then the 30 billion we gave them to like pay off some loans, it adds up to like 48 billion instead of not 350 billion. And Zelensky has said thank you many times. Like this is ridiculous. And then what Trump and his cabinet tried to do with that first proposal of the mineral deal was take advantage of them in this situation, to squeeze out some minerals. And now the current deal that Zelensky handshake agreed to is much better because they talked them down, right? But the fact that they even tried to like exploit them in their situation was just pathetic. And what Trump did today was completely disqualifying, and it was just, I'm sorry, it was just terrible. But if we had Nikki Haley right now, this would not be a problem.
I
In
agree.
fact, everybody would just be really chill right now if we had Nikki Haley. We probably would be off of Twitter a lot more because it wouldn't be as much news every day with all this constant drama or whatever. It would be really nice. Probably go outside more.
I agree with you. This is Trump. Basically, Trump is like kudzu. I've said this before. If you've been to the South, you know kudzu grows everywhere, and eventually, if it could kill trees. He just smothers the oxygen out of everything. How
Yeah.
I mean, people have very strong. He is basically the abortion issue of candidates. People have really strong views about
Oh,
president,
yeah, yeah. No,
and
he's dividing our country, and now he's allying us with the axis of evil against our allies. I mean, it's just
it's scary.
terrible.
And I know this may make me a little unpopular in Democratic circles, but sometimes, even with President Trump, sometimes I've said, if he sounds crazy, there might be something up his sleeve. This was obviously not one of those incidents. Like, this was literally who he is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see how there could have been any ulterior motive that
Yeah.
was to be good for
There
you.
were there were people online trying to claim that he did this so that it create sympathy for Zelensky so that he would get European aid. I'm like, I'm sorry. Did you see his face? He's not that good of an actor. Like it was pure ego. His ego was got in the way of being a more sensible response to Zelensky. And then Vance, who how could anybody look at what Vance did in that room? Just show that November of 2028. Who could vote for him? I mean, he's just the biggest, you know, POS I've ever seen in my life. I actually, I can't think. I've met some really bad people in my life, and I cannot think of anyone who's a bigger jerk than how Vance appeared. I actually can't think in my personal life of a bigger jerk than JD Vance. I mean, just really, just despicable behavior.
So just to be clear, you are not endorsing JD Vance for president in 2020.
No, no, I am never Vance. I actually considered voting not Vance for my write-in for the presidential as a protest against how badly I dislike Vance. Actually, I have to admit something. I got manipulated, right? I got emotionally manipulated when Trump got shot. He was so sympathetic, and he had that such a cool reaction. He comes out and he's waving his arm, and they're going USA, USA. It was like this Teddy Roosevelt moment that he had.
Yeah.
I was fighting with emotions so hard for the next like few days. Like, oh my gosh, can I actually vote for him now? Right. And then he picked Vance as his running mate. And I was like, all right, nope, 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 never. Because you have to understand, like a lot of my academic work has been responding to this thing called post-liberalism, these radicals on the right. And he's like their poster boy. They love him. Like he is their guy. It's like he calls himself a post-liberal. So I had been prepped for years of studying this stuff for how bad Vance is, and to have him be the vice president. And now, and seeing people, and it's been so hard for me. I have to tell my wife I've got to, I'm a practicing Catholic. I have to go to confession for how I talk and think about JD Vance.
No, I hear
He's
that.
making me a worse person. I blame him.
Yeah. Yeah, this administration brings out the worst in a lot of the opposition, because I've seen liberals say some really awful things. I mean, after
Yeah.
Trump was shot, I mean, they said some really horrific
Oh,
things.
that was awful. Yeah, no, and
Like, I don't like Trump, but like, I don't wish death on anyone.
no, no.
And
Yeah,
you
or
have
he
to
made up
watch this.
conspiracy theories about how it wasn't really shot and all this
No,
stuff.
Trump
It
was
was all,
shot. Trump was shot.
yeah, he was shot in the ear. I know, but you remember those like conspiracy theories they were
I
talking
never
about?
bought into those. I actually, I rarely unfriend people on Facebook, but when I saw that, I was like, okay, you're too
Too
crazy.
gone.
I mean, like
Yeah,
that's
no, I know. And honestly, I told my wife, I'm like, I'm gonna calm down about yesterday. I told my wife, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna calm down about Vance. It's not good for my soul. Whatever. I think what shook me about it was all these people that I respected not realizing how bad he was, and then it was like, it just shook me that they didn't see it. I'm like, because he lies all the time, right? And and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna drop it. I'm just gonna be calm. I'm just gonna calmly handle this. I'm not gonna be like one of those guys who goes to full TDS with Trump, right? And then today happened, and I was like, like this was like, would you say that this was maybe the worst Vance has ever looked with the way he treated Zelensky?
yeah. I mean, honestly, I hate to say it, but um, this was more uncomfortable to watch by far than him ordering donuts. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
he thought that was bad. I mean, I mean, go to Krispy Kreme and screw that up. That's fine. But like, this is the world stage. I thought, like, what?
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And I
It
have to
was
ask
just,
quickly because you said you're practicing Catholic. I'm Jewish, so two different religions. What
yeah.
based on what you've seen from some of your fellow Catholics, what do they think of the form of the current president?
Well, they're divided right
Yeah.
around the middle. Catholics more than 50% voted for JD Vance. Or not JD Vance, for Trump. But that doesn't mean much. Some people just didn't like Harris and they voted for Trump. But
Hmm.
I would say most of my Catholic friends aren't huge fans of Trump, but they just think he's better than Democrats, I guess. And then, but then there are some like true believers that really like Trump, or every time he does something bad, they say, "Oh, it was 40 chess." It's like a cult, right? You can't go wrong. It's like if you've got the Wizard of Oz, or you got like somebody behind the curtain, you have like some like like Oracle or something, and they give you some obscure answer, and it turns out to be wrong. And they're saying, no, 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 you just didn't read the tea leaves right. It was actually this or whatever. That's kind of how they are with Trump, right? It's like Trump did something really bad. Like, no, no, you got to understand it's part of his plan, whatever. It's kind of like a cult like that. And that's the reaction that you run into every time he does something bad. But I mean, overall, Catholics are about as split as most Americans on it. Remember, most of America voted for Trump,
Well,
or at
it is
least
largest. It is.
the plurality did, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it is the largest denomination in the United States, so I could imagine this being a divided country, the Catholic faith wouldn't be any different.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought it was kind of hypocritical that the a lot of Catholics would say, "Oh, you cannot vote for Harris because of her abortion views," and then they vote for Trump, and then they defend putting RFK as the head of the HHS, and he has like more radical abortion views than Harris does even. And it was kind of like, yeah, you're saying, but they say, oh, but we're not supporting him for this, we're supporting him for health or whatever. It's like that's what those other people were saying too. I mean, it's a little bit less clear cut than they're saying. It's like you can pick somebody not for the reason that you don't like, but for the other reasons that you think are, because you have to deal with a big country with a lot of things going on.
And I mean, I don't mean to defend the former president, but Ronald Reagan was pro-life, and his vice president, before, prior to him going onto the ticket, H.W. Bush, was pro-choice. So
Oh yeah, that's right.
there's always going to be some diversity of opinion within an administration. I'm not faulting Trump for that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
it is pretty interesting how some people are willing to overlook some really controversial and heartfelt and religiously held beliefs, because they either really like someone or they think that they're going to do something in accordance with their faith or their values. It's really fascinating what humans are willing to compromise in the name of values.
Yeah, well, that's true. Although with the HHS, it's a little different because they deal with a lot of things related to like healthcare and the hospitals and stuff that might actually touch on some of those issues. But
Yeah.
um, I'm not criticizing them so much as the hypocrisy of how they treated the other people. But yeah, no, it's because I'm a Catholic with very Catholic views on things. Um, and that's why I want somebody more like Reagan in there that shares more of my values. Um, and honestly, I mean, it's just yeah. So one thing I've noticed though with the Reagan Caucus is every time Trump does something really bad, we get like a huge boost in followers. So this might be a good 4 years for us, while it's a bad 4 years for America. You
Well,
know?
I mean, I don't want to characterize it this way, but like you guys kind of reminding people of like how there was a voice and there was a message and there was um, a message of positivity prior to Trump coming in. Like Reagan
Yeah.
was someone who, I don't think he was a friend to all Americans, but I knew people who I knew someone or I spoke to someone who worked in the Reagan White House
Mhm.
because I'm a Democrat. I think policy-wise, Reagan was a mixed bag. I think he did some really good things on the world stage, and I think here in the United States,
Mhm.
he's a decent president. Some of his policies I thought were kind of mean in certain instances, but on a
Mhm.
personal level, I heard that Reagan in the White House, if you were having a bad day, he would be a shoulder to cry on, and he would literally
Yeah.
listen and give you his heart. I mean, he was just no one could bring anyone together like Reagan back in that
Yeah.
time. He was
Yeah,
really
that's right. Well, him and Tip O'Neill were like buddies after when they weren't like in the politics, when they were just after hours, they were just buddies, they would just hang out and talk to each other and whatever. It wasn't personal for him.
I
He
could never
realized
see
that.
Trump doing something like that unless he thought there was something in it for him.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. No, I really think Reagan was a good man, a great man, stepped up. He was a great leader on the world stage. I mean, can you imagine just that? I get tears in my eyes even thinking about when he, against all of what the smart people of the day were saying, when he got up and told Gorbachev to tear down that wall or whatever. And I get tears every time I see a video about it, because it's just like he was like, that's why I like Zelensky too. I think Zelensky's kind of like Reagan, like that.
Oh,
He's a
he's an
man who.
actor and he's very smart. I mean, he's very charismatic. He's got some smarts in him. Yeah.
That's right. And he stepped and you put him in a position of responsibility and he steps up to the plate,
And
and
he
he
loves his country. He loves his country
yeah,
like Reagan.
yeah, that's right. So
Hmm.
it's like so yeah, I mean, some of the other countries are getting some great leaders while we're not. So it's their turn, I guess. But
It's our job to step
um,
up.
what's that?
It's our job to step up in the absence of good leadership as far as the White House.
That's right.
And what is
That's
your
right.
favorite? What
And
is
that
your
makes me want to. Oh, sorry. That makes me want to bring up something like most people don't realize that like with the Republican Party is ultimately fueled by primaries, right? You get people in through the primaries, they become the leaders, set up the leadership beneath them, they eventually trickles down or whatever. You got a Reagan revolution after he won a primary. You know what I mean? And Trump was able, after he won a primary and won election, actually primary and then election, right? But primary and then election, then he has power within the party. Um, only 30 million people in a country of 330 million people vote in GOP primaries, right? And in the last election, a lot of these states, before Nikki Haley dropped out, she was getting 30-40% of the vote, right? So to change the GOP from within takes a few million people, like up to maybe as much as 15 million people, but not more than that, right? Um, it's much easier than people think to change it, but we got to start working on it. We can't just start right at the time of the before the primary starts. We got to keep working on it, building that like primary electorate to be uh, to be filled with a bunch of responsible adults who would do the homework, right? And care about this country and are willing to want to get along with their people they disagree with too. You know, they don't want this owning the libs thing has gotten way out of control, right? What's up with this owning the libs thing? I mean, we're missing there's so much collateral damage in that kind of culture warring, where you try to own the lib here because they did something crazy, but then you hit all these other people, right? That aren't doing the thing that you're criticizing. So
I know
like,
that, but when you try to own someone who doesn't agree with you, you also take down a few people on your side as well. And I don't even like to think of it
yeah,
as a side because if you're a citizen, you're my fellow American. That's how,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. But what I've noticed though, because I started, doing work with people who are center left, with this Vital Center thing that I edit, um, a lot of the people in the Democratic Party, especially, people really involved in it, are really center left. They have their own criticisms of the far left, right? Ever since, in the last few years, they've even been a bigger division on them about the far left, right? But Republicans, they view it like all Democrats are like the radical left, you know, and they don't realize how many people, how big of jerks they look like to everyone in between.
Well, we have
You
to wrap
know,
up. I want to know, do you have a website that my listeners can view?
oh, sure. And I'm sorry, I got shook by that Zelensky thing, so I've been a little bit out of sorts. But our website is reagancaucus.org. Please, if you're traditional conservative, a center right conservative, you like the things I've been saying, conservative, come join us and take our pledge to vote in GOP primaries for better candidates.
All right. Well, thank you, Thomas. Thomas House from the Reagan Caucus. Good to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.